Hello and welcome to Bury Our Bones with Cinema, the podcast that lives, breathes and dies classic movies, not so classic movies and everything in between. Jumping back into the podcasting saddle with me is the Travis Scott to my Travis Bickle, the John Lennon to my John McClane, the wonderful Mr. Simon Keet. In today's episode, we celebrate a very special 40th anniversary of Wes Craven's 1984 horror classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street. So sit back and relax as we wonder what branch of Primark Freddy gets his jumper from, what his skincare routine is, and above all else, whatever happens, remember not to fall asleep.
I'm David Heathbrow, Ghost Finder. Now, there are many haunted places up and down the country that if I were to sit here and list them all, by the time I was finished, I'd be a ghost. No, that's just a little joke, although I hasten to add that you should only joke about the forces of evil in the presence of a professional. I once knew a bloke who said that he didn't believe in the supernatural, and the next day he lost his car keys and his dog bit him. Now, you tell me that's not a sign of Beelzebub. But back to business. What I specialise in is determining if there is a presence within your home or office, but office do charge business rates. You and your husband are not trained to know if the fuse blowing on the kettle is a sign of faulty electrics or a message from Satan. I am. I graduated top of my class on the 2-day intensive course at the Lancashire School of the Macabre. For just a snip at £24.97, I will enter your house and check for any unwarranted paranormal. For specialist services, an overnight stay may be required, in which case you must provide adequate catering such as toad in the hole, peas and blancmange to finish. Unfortunately, I'm unable to give a specific price for this, as Dancing with the Devil is not only dangerous, but difficult to quote. That's David Heathbrow, Ghost Finder, as misquoted on BBC BAFTA-winning documentary Debunking Heathbrow. Court case pending. That's David Heathbrow. Find me on CFAX, not the Yellow Pages.
Right.
Cool.
Now, considering I've been ill, I think the chances of me getting through this in one go,
It's all right.
this intro, is going to be... but I'll give it a fair whack anyhow. Hello and welcome to Bury Our Bones with Cinema, the podcast that lives, breathes and dies classic movies, not so classic movies and everything in between. Jumping back into the podcasting saddle with me is the Travis Scott to my Travis Bickle, the John Lennon to my John McClane, the wonderful Mr. Simon Keet. In today's episode, we celebrate a very special 40th anniversary of Wes Craven's 1984 horror classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street. So sit back and relax as we wonder what branch of Primark Freddy gets his jumper from, what his skincare routine is, and above all else, whatever happens, remember not to fall asleep. Fucking hell, we won! Jesus Christ.
Well,
I need a bit of water though, I tell you. Need that after, but there.
Well done.
Okay, so let us know. Let me just minimise that because I don't need that for a fair bit. So if you're all good,
All good, right?
a very, very special anniversary edition of Bury Our Bones with Cinema today, because we are celebrating, as the intro said, 40 years of A Nightmare on Elm Street. And I cannot believe this film is 40 years old, because to me it feels just as relevant today and just as scary today as I can imagine it was in 1984. How about yourself, Si?
Yeah, I first saw it last night, and then rewatched
So
it.
proper fresh to it, then, yeah.
And then a bit, sort of rewatched it earlier today as well. And it's just really cool, isn't it? You see where all the other movies get their inspiration from.
Well, that is a good sign that you watched it a second time in as many in a day, essentially. Because if this was a rubbish film, I doubt you would have done, even though we're doing an episode on it. You know, if you don't like the film or you think, oh, that's terrible, why have we chosen to do this one for this episode? It would be difficult to do a second watch, wouldn't it? So that's a good indictment in and of itself.
And I would watch it for many Halloweens to come, for sure. I mean, I think a few Halloweens ago I watched The Crow, and I remember making a big event out of that.
Which is a great film.
But, this one is just... Yeah, like you said about his Primark jumper, like he's the really iconic sort of figure, isn't he, Freddy Krueger? And he lives in the realm of, dreams and imagination, and he's capable of all sorts of weird stunts. And my initial sort of Freddy Krueger really was groundskeeper Willie, the Simpsons episode. I felt like I'd seen this movie before just because of that Halloween Simpsons episode.
I think there's so many things in pop culture that reference it without you necessarily realising it if you've never seen before. And that groundskeeper Willie is an example of that. But I think he's so ingrained in pop culture today, especially in the horror genre, you can't really go far without stumbling across something that is a reference to Freddy Krueger or a Nightmare on Elm Street.
I didn't even realise the claw from Liar Liar must be a reference to Freddy Krueger.
It's not. It's a reference to... And the only reason I know this is because he goes to watch wrestling with his son. And
it's a wrestling one.
Yeah, it's the finishing move of Kerry Von Erich, part of the Von Erich family.
So it wasn't
No, but you can make those connections. So I've shattered that delusion for you.
Yeah, it was a delusion. It was all a dream. The claw. From Liar Liar, I always liked it when the stepdad character tries to do the claw, and it's really naff.
Who is another... what's the word I'm looking for? Popular figure in the horror genre because he was in the original Saw film.
Really?
Carrie, I can never say his surname, but Carrie Elwes or Carrie Ools or...
Oh, nice. That sounds good.
I do apologise to him and any fans of him because I can't say his surname, but anybody who knows who we're talking about...
Maybe that's why his claw failed, because Jim Carrey was referencing Freddy Krueger and then... The other guy was referencing the wrestling move.
Maybe. That's the thing. That's the difference, yeah. But as I say, he is just so ingrained that there's so many references and there's so many, even, something like Edward Scissorhands is a sort of play on Freddy Krueger with, the knives for fingers, that kind of thing. Obviously not a direct kind of inspiration necessarily, but you can make those links. So... As we release this episode, not when we record it, because as anybody who's done any podcasting knows that you don't record necessarily on the day unless you're live streaming, but as you are listening, hopefully, on day of release to this episode, it will be 40 years since this film came out, November the 16th, 1984, and it was directed by Wes Craven, and it's the film that saved New Line Cinema. So without this film... You don't have a number of films coming out afterwards by New Line Cinema, because this is, as New Line Cinema will say, New Line Cinema is the house that Freddy built, because this saved them from extinction, essentially.
Just because it did well.
It was a make or break film. There was a lot of funding kind of issues with New Line Cinema, and I think they put pretty much everything they had into this film. If it had flopped, they'd have had to have gone bankrupt. But luckily, it didn't flop. Luckily, we're talking about it 40 years later. Says everything you need to know about A Nightmare on Elm Street.
I mean, he's such a cool villain, isn't he? Like the arm extension. That scene's pretty dodgy, isn't it? When he
40 years later, it looks a little bit.
Oh yeah, but I just mean it. Yeah, for me, I wasn't saying because it looks weird.
I personally think that adds to the horror of it now. Is that you think, oh my god, how odd does that look?
That's what I find with older.
At the time, probably you'd have looked and gone, whoa, that's quite freaky. Whereas now, I think it looks a bit odd and a bit janky. But I think that kind of works within the context of Freddy doing weird stuff, weird shit. So
it's a bit trippy, isn't it? And the scene where she's I mean, that's when I was watching it, I was like, oh God, this is mental. When she's what's her name?
So that the character you are speaking of is... So that is... her character name is Tina Gray, and it's played by Amanda Wyss.
Okay. The when she's tossed up onto the ceiling of her room, and that scene is... You're not going to forget that one in a hurry, are you? It's pretty good.
No, absolutely. So I just want to take it back because I want to kind of let everybody know where I first came across this. So for anybody who lives in the UK will know a very popular, I don't really know what you'd call it, but shop called Woolworths. Still going in Australia, apparently, but no longer in England. But I remember walking into Woolworths. I was either with my granddad or my mum. And at the time, there was a 5-disc collector's edition DVD, which, the one that I gave you to watch this film, it's similar to that, but on the cover, rather than having Freddy's face, it has the back of Freddy in like this cloak with his hat on and his knife hands kind of on the back, and it's like this sepia kind of look. And I remember looking at it, and obviously you see the 18 symbol, and so as a kid you're immediately like, oh, I shouldn't be watching that. But there was something about that initial DVD cover that I went, that looks really scary, looks really horrifying, but I kind of really want to know what it is and what it's about. And then I think it must have been at least 6-7 years later, when I was of the age where I could go into town with my mates, had a bit of birthday money, and it wasn't from Woolworths, but I went into, I think, HMV in Worthing. It may have even been MVC in Worthing, if anybody remembers that.
No idea. Well, I don't even remember that. NVC.
MVC. It was essentially HMV, but not.
Oh, fair.
And I went to that store, having a look around, had a bit of birthday money, and I picked up the 7-disc collector's edition, which obviously had all of the films in there rather than just 5. And I immediately fell in love with it. When I got home and watched it, immediately, that first, letterbox kind of introduction to Freddy feels very much like we shouldn't be seeing this. We just see this figure making, his glove with these razor sharp blades on the end. I remember watching it and feeling like I shouldn't be watching this as an audience viewer. Like, it's like a window into his world, and we shouldn't be seeing this, but we are somehow. And that was kind of my first... remember that very, very vividly, going, this is immediately hooked me even more than that initial cover.
I mean, villains with lairs, I like it when they have a lair, because it kind of gives you a bit of an idea of what they do in their spare time. Like, he's always sharpening his knives and stuff. And it
must always be very hot, because it's very steamy in that area, isn't it?
It's probably the reason why in so many video games you've had to mess around with Steve mess around with steam pipes and stuff in this movie, which I don't really thank it for. Like, you're always messing around with steam.
Yeah,
in like Resident Evils and stuff like that.
And that's what I mean about, this I wouldn't have thought this was the first film ever in horror to use steam or pipes, but certainly it's the one that I kind of go to, and I think a lot of people do go to, because it is so ingrained in modern culture. As you just said, games like Resident Evil. As we speak, I'm halfway through playing Silent Hill 2 remaster, but the
Have
original
you been to
game
any
of
boiler
that,
rooms yet?
Yeah, there's a whole point in this hospital which has a very similar looking kind of tone, and there's pipes that make those eerie noises that you think, what's that? And it's just water going through a pipe or gas going through a pipe, whatever it may be.
Do you ever really find out where that boiler room is? Because it's probably is it like beneath the skull?
Yeah,
or something?
I think later iterations kind of go into that mythology. So it's touched upon a little bit here in this film towards the third act, but generally speaking, it's fleshed out in, later iterations. I think number 2, which if you haven't listened to the sequels we wanted versus sequels we got episode, go and have a listen to that. Number 2 is a very flawed film. It's not great, but I still would hold it up in high regard compared to a lot of other horrors, because it has Freddy Krueger in for a start, so you immediately one up on a lot. That goes into it a little bit more. So I think the reason why is because that's where he took his victims back. So before he became this dream, invader or this mythical kind of creature, he was and I don't never know, because I've watched so many documentaries when they spoke about it, but I think in the original series, he's a child murderer. That's where he took his victims and buried his victims, was in that old abandoned steam factory or whatever kind of factory it is. I know in the remake with Jackie Earle Haley, he was a child molester and killer, which I think he was originally supposed to be, but I think Wes Craven thought maybe that's going a bit too far, but that's what they decided to do for the remake. So I think that's the significance of that area, is where he took his victims and where he killed his victims before he was burnt alive and became the Freddy Krueger that we know in the events of the first film.
The mum's interesting, isn't she? She sort of everything just goes up a notch as the movie goes on, and she slowly gets more into. On rewatching it, I realised she's sort of, by the end of it, she's quite ill, and she's like in bed with a bottle of alcohol, I think, and then but I think she puts it down and she sort of says, you need to turn away from it and stuff like that. But the Nancy's like, it will be okay, Mum, stuff like that. Like, she really loses her mind. Yeah,
I think she's a good opposite of Nancy, in the sense of Nancy. Nancy starts out as a very kind of scared, typical, B-movie horror female character, very scared of everything, very, don't hurt me, don't hurt me, don't hurt me. But I think as she gets stronger in her ability to fight Freddy, her mum gets kind of more and more, goes into a more of kind of like a mental episode. So she starts out quite strong, looking out for her daughter, and then by the end of it, as you say, she's just drunk and she's just there going, she has that bit at the end where they put bars on the window and it says, "You're never getting out of here," and she's like absolutely off her tits on vodka.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of mirroring of each other. So, and it's something which you could just gloss over that. You wouldn't necessarily make that connection, but it's there, and I think that's a really good example of the intricacy of this film.
She is pretty. I mean, she's still got like the glove and stuff in like a furnace downstairs or something,
which is a weird thing to have. Keep that?
Yeah,
it's not going to lie. You probably would want to get rid of that.
Yeah,
but it kind of goes some way to explain why Freddy is kind of fixating a little bit on Nancy.
Oh, do you think maybe it's because the mum's still dreaming about it or something?
Well, a lot of the mythology of Freddy Krueger it's all based on fear. So again, this is something that comes out in further iterations. I think it's touched upon here in the first one. But essentially, the more fear you have of Freddy Krueger, the stronger he gets. So I think Freddy versus Jason plays with the idea that everybody's forgotten about Freddy Krueger, so he has no power. And the only way to get power is to start killing people, but he can't do that because he's not strong enough. So he resurrects Jason from the Friday the 13th franchise to start killing in Elm Street, where everybody will start thinking Freddy's back, and Freddy starts getting power. And that's kind of the thing throughout the series, is the more scared you are of him, the more powerful he is. So obviously the reason why Nancy is able to start to fight back is because she's no longer scared of him. And even there's that bit at the end where she says, "I take all the power you have because I'm not afraid of you," or something along those lines towards the end of the film.
And she kind of gets to learn about this sort of stuff when she's talking to Johnny Depp on a bridge or something. Do you remember that? He's read a book, hasn't he? Help me out. Has he read he's read a book or something? And then he's about
it's a bit of a tenuous link. Because he's read a book on Native American dreams.
Okay.
And starts to explain essentially Freddy Krueger's what I've just explained to you. And they kind of just accept that. They do just kind of accept that that's what's happening, which is a bit of a whim and is a bit of a long shot. But it kind of shows how desperate they are at that point.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's when she's got that book about all the traps and Home Alone sort of stuff she's going to pull off. That's really satisfying, isn't it, when she sets up all the traps and you're like, okay, we're on that part of the movie now when he's come into the real world and he's just the man. He's just, well, he's not, but he's he's sort of a bit more susceptible to like all her really cool traps, like
and I think
one.
I think part of the success of this film, and to be honest, part of the success of other big horror franchises like Halloween, like Friday the 13th, is because it plays with the genre. So it doesn't do what everything else or most other things were doing. So the whole final girl thing comes very much from Friday the 13th, Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, without these films showing female characters in a different light than what was expected at the time. You don't really get that whole final girl thing. It doesn't really exist. It kind of, I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't have got to where it is now, but it would certainly took a little bit longer. And I think without things like showing her, okay, well, I'm in this situation, it's shit, I'm scared, I might die, I'm losing my friends, what can I do? I know. And it feels like a very silly thing on the face of it, but actually when you consider she's a teenager, not that particularly experienced in the world, you kind of grasp onto whatever you can at the time. And a book like what she has, where it's like, homemade booby traps and all of those kinds of things, would be something that you'd go, I perhaps have nothing else, let's try this and let's try and play Freddy at his own game.
Yeah.
Without that kind of that, you don't get final girls really, or as I said, takes a lot longer to get there.
I didn't think about the fact she's kind of playing him at his own game of sort of elaborate contraptions and stuff. I guess. Wait, does he use elaborate contraptions?
Well, he
has he almost sort of Mortal Kombat fatalities everyone, doesn't he? He's like they're all like the geezer of blood and stuff like that. Is like, it's super, almost like he wants people to sort of see it and be horrified, so you get more scared of him. And I guess she's like, I don't know, she's had to be a bit creative like him to get her own back, which is kind of cool. She had to think outside the box.
It's and that, I think, it shows her intelligence at a relatively young age. For example, Glenn's not doing that.
He's just listening to music.
Tina didn't do that. Rod didn't do that. And so that very easily sets her apart from her friends and shows her, not that the reason her friends died is because they weren't intelligent, but it goes to that thing of going, okay, well, we believe it a bit more, her surviving, because we've seen this character development and this character arc of her go from, an innocent teenager who just wants to have fun and live her life to this person who now, well, I'm in a shit situation, I got to fight. Otherwise, I'm going to end up like Tina, I'm going to end up like Rod, I'm going to end up like Glenn. Well, at that point, Glenn's still there, but, essentially, I'm going to end up dead. So, it's a tiny thing in the grand scheme of the franchise. It sets a very solid foundation for what you expect from the lead character.
And and I think what this movie sets as like why it probably had so many sequels and stuff is because it doesn't. answer too many. Well, I don't know. There's just a lot of mystery there surrounding Freddy Krueger. There's so much stuff. I guess they probably explained it all by the time you get to the later ones.
And then some.
Yeah. But I feel like you really do leave wanting more, and then you want to leave. I didn't leave. I just watched it here. But I went to bed thinking about it, and I was like, I can't. And I was and you think, I wonder where that lair is, and I don't know. Wonder all that. What it was like on the night where all those worried parents went to. It was worried parents, I think, went to set the place alight and stuff, and there are some characters. The police dad is quite
played by John Saxton.
Yeah, the police dad. What do you think about the police dad?
Well, he's an interesting fellow. On one hand, I look at it and go, he's just trying to do everything he can to protect his family and find the killer of these kids. It's his job. But on the other hand, I'm also like, but he also then uses his own daughter as bait to the person he thinks killed Tina in Rod to try and get Rod. So I'm like, well, you can't really care too much about your family. And he does tend to leave his clearly problematic wife and his daughter's mother in charge when she clearly has a drinking problem. So
are they broken up, those two?
I don't know.
I can't remember.
I don't think they are.
I assume they weren't together.
But there definitely is that subtext, isn't there? There's definitely that kind of something not quite right here.
Yeah.
They've had problems, and maybe the problems have stemmed from, since we've done this, does he know about it? Is she trying to hide it from him? Because it never explicitly states that he knows.
Are they ever in the same scene together?
I think they are. When she first, when Tina dies, they go to the station. And Marge, what did you let her do this for? Whatever. And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, but you weren't there," or whatever it is. Or you get that kind of, you read that subtext in the sense of they've definitely got some marital problems going on. I think.
Yeah. And what do you mean? Does he know if they actually killed Freddy Krueger?
Yeah, because
they're like vigilante.
He does seem like a by the book type of cop.
He's definitely a by the book cop.
So I don't think he knows. And I'm if anybody knows and is shouting at the screen now, going, well, yes, he does know because of this, and this. I do apologise, but I don't think he does, and that may explain why there's those problems, because she actually knows. Well, I done the thing,
and why is she so traumatised?
Yeah, I helped do the thing that actually protected our children. You didn't, because you were too busy tied up with red tape. And I suspect there may be other issues as well.
It's so frustrating when his decision that annoys me in the movie is he asks his deputy. No, I don't know. Is he a deputy? He asked one of the other cops to keep an eye. She says, "Come back in 20 minutes while and break the door down or something." And and he goes, "Okay," but then he asks his partner to just keep an eye on the house, and he asks someone I feel like if that guy doesn't really go, he doesn't really call to action very quick, does he? That bloke, when he's seeing
There's a reason he's not the sheriff, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's why would you? For example, what is he doing in that? He's probably just upstairs in the opposite house in that blood room. Meanwhile, his daughter's in a house that's locked up and screaming from the windows and stuff. But that makes it super tense, doesn't it? And that whole bit's great.
Yeah, it's. I think it's a film that constantly builds the stakes and constantly builds much like with horror films. I think there is certainly a contingent of fans, sometimes myself included, who, if you're going to watch a horror film, you kind of want to see gruesome deaths. The Saw franchise is successful for a reason, and I think with horror films you do kind of have to one up yourself with every death. You have to start off strong, otherwise people will be like, why do we care? That was boring. And then you kind of have to one up it again, and then one up it again. And by the point you get to the end, it's like, what are you going to do? What's the climax? And I think this does it really, really well. That initial death scene with Tina is so well shot from a filmmaking perspective. It's admirable, and you know how it's done. It's nothing you've not seen necessarily before. Well, maybe in 1984 you may not have seen it before. In 2024, you've seen it before, but you perhaps haven't seen it done as well. I think the only other time I can say it's been done as well is in The Fly. They have a revolving room where you see them go up the wall. So again, that's an episode. Go back and listen to.
Yeah, that one. It's when she sort of plummets to the bed at the end, and then just blood splats over matey boy.
Rod's face. It's quite.
The bath one's pretty. Well, it's not a death actually, but that's grim, isn't it? When the sort of claw. When the claw comes up.
Yeah, there's a lot of intimate. I mean, the whole film is based very much on invading your intimate moments. You know, I don't think for me, the whole premise realm. You know, when you're sleeping, that's when you're most vulnerable, essentially, and this is when he's his most powerful. You know, everybody's had that dream where you feel like you're not in control and you're doing things that you can't stop yourself doing, and it's scary. Everybody's had that type of dream. Watching this film just makes that worse, because it's just filled with that kind of... And that bath scene is another, you know, it's a very intimate, vulnerable moment for anybody who's been in the bath. Again, you're going to be completely naked, and you've got this knife hand coming out from the middle of your ghoulies. It's not going to be nice, is it?
Ghoulies. No, it's grim. And just when she's at school as well, and she sort of drifts off, and then what happens in that one?
So that's you see Tina in the body bag. Don't you?
That's pretty grim.
I think what we're very quickly early on in establishing is that there's so many great scenes.
Yeah.
You know, we've been speaking about this for 20, 25 minutes, and already we're going, that scene, that scene, that scene. You know, I think a lot of films, you know, we spoke about, not so long ago, we spoke about American Werewolf in London, which is another great film. But generally speaking, everybody kind of remembers that film for one scene. Generally speaking. Not to say the rest of it's pants, because it's not. But generally speaking, here, there's so many good things, so many things that people pick out and can remember from it. And throughout the franchise, I think if this film doesn't work and isn't very good, you don't get to, you know, how many iterations have we seen of Freddy Krueger now in not only film, in TV, in Mortal Kombat, in video games, in whatever. You don't get to that without this film being tip top, you know. And you kind of you're in capable hands at this point with Wes Craven.
Yeah.
Who had done The Last House on the Left, very controversial film. He'd done The Hills Have Eyes, again another controversial and scary horror film, and then he follows it up with this.
Did this make him mainstream? Because those other ones are like I wouldn't watch Hills Have Eyes tonight. Like, that ain't the vibe I'm on. Do you know what I mean?
I think the others are a bit more cult.
Yeah,
this is more
grim.
Well, yeah, and you know, I said the phrase earlier. The house at New Line Cinema is the house that Freddy built. I think for a lot of people, you know, their houses were built by Freddy in a metaphorical sense. Wes Craven being kind of one of them. I don't think he would have been forgotten about by any means, because I think Last House on the Left was quite influential. Hills of Eyes, again, quite influential, but certainly not to the degree that Freddy Krueger is, you know, which is a Wes Craven creation.
Did this, the remake they made, was it terrible?
I think it is, but it's not unwatchable.
No, okay.
I think the problem I have with it is it's not the 1984 original.
Yeah.
I'm all up for a remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street, especially today with Robert Englund saying he probably can't play Freddy anymore because of his age. I'm on board with the remake because I think even though we've seen a lot, you can still do an awful lot with the character. The problem I have is they took pretty much everything everybody loved about Freddy and forgot about it. So it's kind of explored a little bit in this one, but certainly becomes something in later iterations where Freddy is this wisecracking comedy character. He's a little bit like that in this, but he still has that. The first time we really see his face is when he cuts off his own fingers and he smiles at Tina. Now that to me says this is a man who likes to play with people a little bit. Otherwise you would just, he's not a Michael Myers who just walks in, kills you and walks out again, or a Jason Voorhees who does very similar things. This guy wants to play with you and toy with you and have some fun first. And I think that was very much lost for me in the remake. It's been an awfully long time since I've seen it. I think I went to see it when it came out.
What did they do with that? Was it serious?
It was very much, let's go really deep into the backstory of the character. Yeah. Let's make it really dark and dingy, and let's go... Again, it was too much of that horror element, if that makes at all any sense, because this is a out-and-out horror, obviously. But it wasn't particularly... I don't think any of the deaths were particularly memorable, because I can't remember them. I don't think any of the characters were really likeable. I think they did use CGI for his face. So again, it makes him look unrecognisable from what we know. I don't think Jackie Earle Haley's performance was bad, but it wasn't great. I think he could have done a lot more with a better script. But the main kind of flaw I had with it is it felt lifeless. It didn't feel like a continuation of the series, even though it's a remake. It didn't feel like they were trying to appeal to a new audience other than for a cash grab, which is always... I understand it happens, and I understand it's never going to stop happening, but there has to be an element of love there for a remake to kind of really work. Like, even the remakes that I would say are bad, really bad, if it's been made with some sort of love and, passion for the original, then I can kind of understand some of it. For example, the Psycho remake in 1999 with Vince Vaughn, who plays Norman Bates. It's pretty much shot for shot a remake of Hitchcock's. I think it was Gus Van Sant who done that. Could be wrong. Now, everybody hates that, and I'm not saying I like it, because I really don't, but I can at least see he kind of went, well, I'm not going to be able to shoot it better than Alfred Hitchcock, so let's just do the same shots. I get on board and I can say, okay, well, he has that, there seems to be an element of passion there, or an understanding of why Psycho worked. With a Nightmare on Elm Street remake, there didn't seem to be any of that. They seem to think we can put anybody in the role of Freddy, which is interesting once we get into how this film was made, because they very early on made the same mistake with Freddy Krueger. They realised they couldn't just put anybody in the role. But we'll get into that a little bit later. But if we go into the figures and why this film saved New Line Cinema, essentially. So it was made on a $1.8 million budget, which in 1984 for a horror film was about the norm. It wasn't an expensive number. I think we spoke about other films in that era, $10 million. So it was a low budget affair, to be in all honesty. So you kind of have to be quite shrewd when you've got a low budget in how you spend that. But in its opening weekend, on a $1.8 million budget, it made back $1.2 million, nearly $1.3 million. So within one weekend, you're almost at break-even point, and that's just one weekend. So that is, and it, with a film that as good as this, it's only going to get better with word of mouth, and the numbers prove this. With a domestic gross, bearing in mind $1.8 million made $25 million back, which is about just under £20 million. In today's money, that is about $78 million it made back. So you can see why this saved New Line Cinema, because if they put all they had into this and it had a budget of 1.8, 25, nearly 26 million is a really good return.
So what did New Line Cinema go on to do after this?
So many different things. Off the top of my head, unfortunately, I can't quite think. But if you Google New Line Cinema, it is a long plethora of films. Even today, they're still releasing films. They're one of the big, the iconic movie publishers then.
Okay, yeah, The Conjuring, It, Chapter 2, Conjuring 2, Shazam.
Big budget films.
Yeah, Don't Worry Darling is one of the most recent ones. Have you seen that?
I have seen that.
What do you think? I haven't seen it.
It's not bad.
It's on Amazon at the moment. I might watch it. But
none of those films get made, or at least not published by New Line Cinema without Nightmare on Elm Street. So it's a real testament to the direction and the script, which was both composed and written by Wes Craven himself, who you mentioned earlier had worked on the last House on the Left, Hills of Eyes, People Under the Stairs, Scream. Go back and listen to our Scream episode. It was produced by Robert Shea, who's worked on things like Critters, Frequency. He also worked on The Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. The composer for the music, which we will get onto the music at some point, was Charles Bernstein. We have the cinematographer was Jacques Hadekin, who'd work on Wishmaster, Captain America, The Winter Soldier, Black Panther recently, before unfortunately he passed away in 2023. We have Patrick McMahon as the editor, along with Rick Shane, who also edited the film. Casting director was Annette Benson, who'd worked on things like Christine, Universal Soldier. And the production designer was Greg Fonesca, who'd worked on, or has worked on, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Critters, Striking Distance, amongst many. So a good team behind the camera, which is always a good foundation. Not necessarily the be-all and end-all, but there's always a good foundation. With a $1.8 million budget, which I realise is, in 1984... probably on the higher end of low budget than other things, things like Sleepaway Camp around that sort of time, Prom Night, those sorts of things, I would imagine would have had a lower budget. You need to, especially for what I would call a spectacle-based horror film, where there are going to be lots of practical effects, there are going to be lots of camera trickery, there's going to be lots of production elements. It's not just, okay, we need somebody to do some special effects for the bodies and the kills, but other than that, the rest of it is fairly by the numbers. You need to know how to use that money, and you need a experienced director in the helm. And I think Wes Craven, as I say, very much cemented himself as one of the pioneers of horror through this film. He'd already got to a point where he was, okay, we know he's a good hand when it comes to horror, but at this point it was him almost, putting his hat in the ring for, speak about me in the same way you speak about John Carpenter, that kind of realm.
Yeah, it reminded me of John Carpenter a lot, to be honest, especially like the music, lots of like synthy stuff with lots of. I was telling you earlier, but when I rewatched it, I had the washing machine on in the background, and then I had to pause the DVD to see if the sound was the washing machine or the sort of background ambiance and noise. But yeah, it really is like quite a visceral experience, isn't it? When you're in that sort of suburbia, which is done in loads of movies, isn't it? But I'd say it's done quite well here as well. The whole movie feels like it's a bit of a dream.
And that's the thing that kind of, because the suburban area is like the idyllic American dream lifestyle, there is that kind of rhetoric of, what, am I still in a dream? You know, am I awake now or am I asleep? I'm not quite sure. And I think that throughout, that constant questioning of reality, and as an audience member, we're never quite sure. The more you think about whether or not you're in a dream, the more you can't answer the question. I think it'd be interesting to hear your take on it, actually, considering you've never seen it before, because I watch it with eyes of going, oh yeah, I can see that now. But it's interesting, I can't quite remember when I first watched it what my thoughts were of, did you think this was a dream? Did you think that was, or did you expect that to be part of a dream, or did you expect that was just part of the reality?
I think maybe mostly just the ending, right, which is kind of super ambiguous anyway, but I think that's the bit where I kind of, it's one of those things you come away a bit, not annoyed, but you're like, oh, yeah, like, because she, she does him in, like, she turns around, she sort of does it reminded me of the ending of, for a moment I thought she was the girl from Labyrinth as well. Like, when I watched it, I thought she looks like her, but
I can see that.
And at the end, it's similar to it. Sorry to ruin Labyrinth for you, but at the end of Labyrinth, she says, "You have no power over me," and then he goes, "Oh, it's like, no, I don't know what he says." It does a very David Bowie thing, and then and it's kind of similar here.
Trying
in that
not
she
to do a David Bowie impression now,
but then she, in this, she sort of turns away from him, and then she says, you said earlier, any power, you're does she actually say you're shit? I was like, what she say? She says like something funny. It's great.
I really wish I could remember that now.
Yeah.
But she says something to that effect, doesn't she? She kind of, it's a signal into the audience that the reason she's able to do this is because she no longer fears him.
Yeah. So she says no longer fears him. He sort of disintegrates. And then does she walk out the door, and then you're on the last scene of when she's saying goodbye to her mum, and she gets in the car with all her friends. You think, oh, has she reversed the curse of him, maybe, and maybe it's all reverted back to normal, and then the car all locks, the roof comes down, they're stuck in the car, and then the Freddy Krueger pulls her mum in, and there's that. One of the things I didn't notice, I watched a video afterwards of the effects and stuff, is that she turns into a balloon and she's pulled.
It's one of my favourite shots because of how ridiculous it looks.
But I didn't notice it.
I think it's one of those things, when you know how it's done, when you see it being done, you see it even clearer.
I think if you blink,
because you're not expecting it, I think it catches you off guard. When you're expecting it, it looks exactly like what happened. They pull a blow up doll through that little tiny window.
But at that point, I didn't think, when she went out the door, I was like, oh, the curse has ended. Oh, it seems a bit weird. But that was probably, and I guess at that point you're like, oh, is this a dream? But I wasn't really like that throughout the movie. I think I kind of saw the dream bit when when I thought, oh, she's asleep here probably. Or, I think I was pretty, pretty astute with the dreams when it went to dream moments. But on the end bit, I was, oh no. I
think it's part and parcel of that typical staple of the horror genre where, probably there were probably more memorable twists, Friday the 13th being one of them. Is it prom night or sleepaway camp? Might be prom night, with a hand out the grave, but very much in that kind of, by that point in 1984, people are expecting what's going to happen here. We've seen stuff
Carrie,
before.
The hand's already come out the grave and stuff at that point, right? Wait, is that the ending of the Carrie, with the hand come out the grave, or is that just a scene in it?
I think there's a scene. I think may even.
I think that's
maybe
the ending.
Carrie,
I think that's the
where
ending.
She's looking at a grave, and then all of a sudden a hand comes out, and nobody. And it's
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got Friday the 13th, where it's that calming music on the boat, and then all of a sudden Jason jumps out, and it's So by that point, people are expecting a bit of a twist. And what I like about this is that you can see it before you see it. So if you're a little bit astute, you can see before that roof goes up, you can see, oh, that's red and green, like in a stripy fashion.
Oh, I see.
So you can, if you're looking, you can see it. So it's not.
Yeah.
And as I say, I always find that suburban life. So at that point, it almost feels too good to be true.
Yeah.
It's like there's almost like a bit of a smoky, foggy kind of filter on the camera where it looks like a dream. And so I can't remember what I first thought when I first watched it, unfortunately. But I know everyone since, I've always gone, okay, yes, I know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. But it's always a kind of thing of going, well, I know that it's telling me something's not right here because there's this, it's too good to be true. It looks very dreamlike in its presentation.
What do you reckon? I mean, he's played pretty well, isn't he, Freddy? But he's not. He's also a bit of a Phantom of the Opera type character, and his face isn't on screen that much, is it? Or is it? But there's a lot of chasing and stuff like that.
I think it's not on screen as much as I remembered it being, but probably because I've seen later iterations where they really push Freddy as all of the other iterations, other than I'd say number 2. It's a Freddy film. We don't really care about the main characters in the traditional sense. We care about Freddy, and I think that's kind of, again, a little bit, not to mention in every sentence all the other horror genres, but the horror genres that have really lasted, that are still being talked about and still referenced today: Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, the big 3 for me. The reason they're remembered is because they have 3 main villains who are really well developed, and they take on a life of their own. Freddy, I think, is the best of the 3, certainly from a performance perspective. Not to degrade any of the performances of Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees, but you made a very good point just a second ago, and I mentioned it briefly earlier. It's a good performance from the guy, from Robert Englund, who plays Freddy Krueger. And they very nearly, in the second one, didn't have him.
Oh, really?
Because what they said, this is New Line Cinema, or particularly Robert Shea, because Wes Craven didn't come back to direct the second one. So they said that we don't need Robert Englund. We don't need him. You can put anybody as Freddy, similar to what they'd done initially. So when they were first casting Freddy, they go, we'll get a stuntman to do it. We don't need an actor. We'll just get a stuntman because obviously he's going to be doing certain bits. So particularly, I think at the time they knew the scene where he's walking up the stairs on fire from this film. They knew they were going to do that. So, we need a stuntman. So let's just use a stuntman for the whole of it. And immediately when they auditioned with Robert Englund, actually, no, I think they auditioned him and said, no, we're going to have a stuntman, and then realised when they put a stuntman in there, we're not getting any of that Robert Englund-ness, or that, for lack of a better term, we're not getting any of that performance value, so it doesn't look great. And then they made the same mistake with the second one and said, we'll just put a stuntman in there, we'll recast him. And they'd done the same thing, and then they started shooting, and they went, it doesn't work, does it? Give Robert a call, and Robert was like, well, yeah, I told you, I'm not being big-headed or anything, but I put a lot of work into the character. Yeah. And he does put a lot of work into the character. It's not just, walking and stabbing someone and killing somebody. There's a lot of humour, there's a lot of physicality to it. And without that, this character doesn't become what he becomes. It becomes, a bit B-movie-esque. So let's go through the rest of the cast, because I think we've touched upon Robert Englund there. So in the role of Nancy Thompson, we have Heather Langenkamp. In the role of Lieutenant Thompson, we have John Saxon. In the role of Marge Thompson, we have Ronnie Blakely. In the role of Glenn, we have a very young Johnny Depp. In the role of Rod Lane, we have Zeus Garcia, who was formerly known as Nick Corrie. And in the role of Tina Gray, we have Amanda Wiss, or Wiss. I don't know how to say her name. I don't know if that's a German W or a normal W, but Amanda Wiss. And across the board, I think it's a really... I'm not going to say it's an amazing cast, but I think the cast perform their function in the best way possible, as much as they can. I think one of the standouts, obviously, has to be Freddy, but I think there are some... I think we should also put some of the... If, for example, if we dislike Nancy, if we dislike any of the other characters, then we don't really feel as much when they get killed by Freddy. So it's important you get those castings right.
Yeah, I think Nancy's really cool. I think she's really believable when she's learns how to do all the traps and stuff. And she has a few quips of like Johnny Depp, like when they're turning the lights off, and then he's like, "We're gonna do something, but it's not what you're thinking," or something. He's like, "Huh," because he's like a jock type character, and she's
he is, but he's different from Rod, because I find so Rod is obviously that typical jock, only thinks about one thing, getting in the pants of his girlfriend, that type of person. But Glenn, I find him a little bit more... The only word I can use to describe him properly for me is the word bumbling.
Yeah, okay.
He's sort of a bit of a goofball.
Yeah.
At the same time as being a young, attractive young lad. When he's on the phone to his mum or his aunt. He's on his phone to his mum saying he's at Aunt Ross, isn't it? His aunt's house. And he's like, oh yeah, you can hear the planes coming in, and he plays it on his radio. The sound of the planes coming in.
Oh, that's a great bit, actually.
And then it changes to like gunshots and stuff, and he's like, oh, there must be some sort of chase going on outside. I have to call you back, Mum. He's constantly doing
he's
things like
the
that.
Silly boy next door.
Yeah.
Isn't he?
He's likeable more than anything.
Yeah, he is likeable. And it's almost nice in the way that he just falls through his bed, because like the other ones have a bit more of a horrible end. I mean, I guess his ending is horrible, being a blood geezer, but you don't see it. You just see him fall through the bed, really, with all his stuff. And I like the cast. I think they're really... I mean, the one person, to be honest, the one person I wasn't really buying was maybe it just didn't go into like the mum and dad's relationship, but the dad, I was like, that's probably the one character I don't think it was the actor's fault or anything. I even think it's good. I don't think it was bad. It's all good, but I think he's probably the one character I don't know. I didn't really buy him as much for some reason. But the mum's, that sort of. The mum really sells it throughout the whole movie, I think, and it brings that sort of Carrie type sort of... She's something up there, isn't there?
Yeah,
and I buy their mum and daughter relationship, or not. The first girl, we don't see enough of her, but we get to know her enough, so we actually do care about her, and it's almost a switcheroo, I guess. But yeah, I think it's really nice how Nancy comes through, really, and you're really, really rooting for her. I was really rooting for her just to when she really sort of came into action, and her mum had made all those stupid decisions, and she was like, making sure her mum was okay in bed. She was like trying to help Glenn across the road and trying to kill Freddy Krueger all at the same time.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of things there. I think firstly, the role of Tina, I think, is a really important one, because she almost becomes a little bit of the rug pull moment in the film, where you think for the first sort of 15 minutes or so, you think she's the main character. You think she's the main girl. We're going to see her be tormented by Freddy throughout the whole film. You see her very, she's, other than Freddy, she's the first character you see in that innocent white dress running through those, that abandoned factory. And then 20 minutes in, she dies, and you're like, oh. And at that point, that's where we start to see, oh, okay, Nancy's the main character. This is Nancy's story. And I think without her character, and to be fair, it's nothing to do with her performance. I think that's how it's written. Without that character, you have that kind of realisation earlier on that Nancy's the main character, and so immediately you kind of throw away Tina's death. But by positioning her early on in the main focal point, we now care a little bit more about Tina's death.
You're right there.
And as so we mentioned Tina's death earlier, but her death is really, really powerful. In every way, how it's shot. You see her crawling up the walls, which is a great shot in and of itself, and then she's spinning around, like, hovering, and even somebody like Rod, who's a bit of a cool guy, likes to think he's a tough man, he's looking at it going, what the fuck is going on here? And then as you mentioned it, and it was something I forgot to make a note of, and now that you've mentioned it, I've realised how good it is. When the blood hits him in the face, that's a bit where you kind of go, oh shit, like
she's dead.
That's grim, that's his girlfriend who's just died in front of him. And he's got, he's covered in her blood.
I was actually thinking as well when she was up on the scene, it's like, oh, she might. I didn't really know. Maybe it's stupid now thinking about it, but I didn't really think she's dead until she sort of until it became a bit more obvious.
I think because we think she's the main character, we're going, oh, she can't die. This is obviously a dream. This is obviously she's going to wake up from this in a minute, and she's going to be injured or hurt.
And also, I guess through the rest of the movie, you hope that they wake up, like when, in the school bit, she wakes up just in time, or like when she sets the alarm towards the end, she wakes up just in time. The setting the alarm
even
towards the end is a great way of
where he scratches her and she wakes up and she's got the scratches on her nightie.
Yeah.
And her questionable mother is like, oh, you keep it down in here, both characters have got questionable mothers. The only one who doesn't is Glenn.
His mum.
His mum seems really nice.
Wait, who's the other? What's the other questionable mother like?
So the mum of Tina is obviously. I think it implies she's a prostitute to some extent. If not, she's definitely a very shady character. And then Nancy's mum is a bit of a questionable character. Yeah, and we see her descend into that kind of. I do
think she's sort of. I think with Nancy's mum, it's kind of definitely. She's definitely. You can understand why she's a bit tormented because she's had something. She's been involved with the whole Freddy Krueger greater lore of. She's done something terrible, but also something that she thinks is right, and then she's still got this glove downstairs, and it says Fred Krueger.
I believe that the casting of Anthony Hopkins in the role of Dr. Fraser Crane will go down in history as one of the great casting mistakes of the last century. Who do we have on line one, Roz? On line one, we have Bill from Buffalo. He's just not feeling himself. Well, hello, Bill. I'm listening. Yes, Dr. Crane. I would just like to know, would you me? Would you me real hard?
Did you know about that, Ryan, that he had a school bully called Fred Krueger or something?
Yes, I did.
Which is very cool, and it very much...
Not for Fred Krueger, it's not.
No, but it just sounds like the name of school bully, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you hear
that's
like
Fred Krueger. Yeah, you can just hear it, can't you?
Yeah, and I love it. I love little things like that. When there's some like bit, I think when there's bits of reality in a movie, it seems to carry like a stronger weight, maybe like it does in all sorts of things, like in music as well. And there's like an element of truth to a song. I think it sort of cuts deeper. You know?
So his high school bully was Fred Krueger, and he coupled that with I think he had a recurring dream about a man who wore what Freddy wore. essentially.
Dark.
And it was a dream he had when he was a kid, and he was scared, by the dream. And so he went, okay, well, I didn't like that kid at school. I was really scared of that dream. I'll put the two together. That's how he's going to look, and that's what he's going to be called. So, yeah, as you say, those little elements of reality and it meaning something to the director, I always find means that they're a little bit more invested in making it work. If you know what I mean, like if it was me and it was like,
I've got some names in my head that I could dish out as their super villains.
To be fair, we probably got a couple of the same.
Yeah, I think so. And the names sound like a great character now you think of it. And isn't it cool? Like when you take something that
I feel like we might have to say some of these names off recording.
When you say something that. When you take something that's affected you and make it into, I know this movie is a horror movie, but make it something that sort of, you put it into art and stuff. It's he's taken this potential school bully and made this sort of iconic, really cool character from a horrible experience. It's
a bit of a cathartic moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because now, I mean, depending on how much it affected you, if it was like a relentless bully and he really, really, really bullied you, do you want to create a character called Fred Krueger and have to be reminded of it every...
Immortalise them, yeah.
But I think it goes to that thing of, as I was saying...
going to work, like you get a job interview and it's like, okay, yeah, Fred Krueger, okay. We don't think you're right for our company. People might think he changed his name to that or something.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? He might he's just some psychopath who's changed his name to Fred Krueger.
I always feel like that with Michael Myers, the actor. I'm like...
Yeah.
Like, I mean, he's made his own career and his own kind of legacy for himself, but there must have been a point where he was like, I cannot do anything in Hollywood because of this Michael Myers character.
Did you ever think that he was played by Michael Myers? Like, because I
think there was a point where I definitely did.
Your brain just can't take both those names at the same time. Yeah. I was like, that Austin Powers guy, he must do something to do with that.
That's where they got it from, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like he's more... I mean, Wes Craven is a very much an invested type of director anyway, from my own kind of experience of him. But having those small little tiny things that, if he'd have just created the name out of thin air, wouldn't have made any difference really to us viewing it. But it adds to the whole lore and the mythology of this character and of this franchise, where it's, it feels like all these little things, they're like puzzle pieces, and all of a sudden...
all lines up.
Yeah.
New Line Cinema, all lines up. Yeah, and I think... I feel like everything probably did line up for this movie. The time, the actor, the vision of it. Like, it definitely comes across as... So, these movies that, it's been the same with American Werewolf in London. They hit every box. They have a slight comedic thing in them. It's not devoid of humour. This movie isn't just like... I can't imagine there's probably many jokes in Hills of Eyes.
No,
I don't. Do you know what I mean? So,
yeah,
but I feel like when there's a bit of sense of humour, there's horror, there's a bit of there's family, there's like real emotional bonds in it. When it has all these things and they come together and they all line up, it can really work. And my favourite movies always have a bit of everything in. Really, they always have a bit of because it's hard sometimes to sit for 1.5 hours without a little bit of if this movie didn't have a bit where he chops his fingers off, whatever he does, whatever he says, some stuff. Are any of his things he says in this movie like massive quotes, or is it more the quote of "Don't go to sleep"?
Yeah, not so much in this movie. There's lots as the franchise goes on. My favourite is, I want to say it's in number 4. I think it's in Dream Warriors, but I can't remember if that's number 4 or number 5. But
I think that's number 3 because it's the one where he comes back to direct it.
I don't think...
Do you want me to check?
Double check. But essentially, whichever one Dream Warriors is, and to be fair, I'm not a total expert on this franchise, and I feel like any time I make a mistake, people will be, throwing stuff at, their speakers and what
It's
have
number 3.
Number 3. So
Yeah.
you were.
I just saw it earlier.
Fair enough.
Because I saw that it's the one he comes back for. Dream Warriors. Wes Craven.
Yeah. So there's a bit where he's got he becomes a TV essentially, grabs one of the protagonists. His head is out of the top of the TV. His arms are at the side. Grabs her. And he says, "Welcome to prime time, bitch!" And then smashes the TV, or smashes her head through the TV screen. That's my favourite. But there's lots of them throughout that are all like that. And it's always a bit of a... I think potentially... I'm not going to say he invented that, but it's certainly what popularised that almost
Goofy
Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of...
quips.
Funny one-liner after you kill somebody in an action film. Here, it's what's Freddy going to say after he kills them?
Yeah, and it's quite cool. It's a villain doing it rather than
that's
James Bond doing it.
I think that's what's made him likeable to the point where people really sort of not resonate with Freddy Krueger, because that's a weird thing to say, but people like the character of Freddy Krueger, and I think that's the reason why he's been able to go into lots of different things in pop culture, is because he's a bit... If you have a Jason Voorhees or a Michael Myers in something, they're not going to talk. They're a mute character. But with Freddy, he can say something. They had the Nightmare on Elm Street series, where he was like the crypt keeper from Tales from the Crypt, but it was Freddy Krueger introduced in each episode. So you can do things like that a little bit more. Even things like when we've played, I think, was it Mortal Kombat X that he was in? Or was it Mortal Kombat 9 he was in? I don't think he said anything there, but it's like the fatalities are very much influenced by horror films, and to the point where it feels very much influenced by Freddy Krueger, because you feel like when a fatality happens in Mortal Kombat, you're kind of expecting a Freddy Krueger one-liner afterwards.
Of course. They're very much like... I mean, the one from this movie feels like the blood geezer thing feels like it's just the name of
fatality. You can hear that afterwards, can't you?
Yeah. I don't know if I just said this earlier now because we've been going on, but I feel like that there was someone said it on a YouTube video I watched about this, Jason and the other one.
Mike Myers.
Yeah. Jason Jason and Mike Myers. They're limited by reality, whereas have I said this already?
No, I don't think
whereas Freddy Krueger's not limited to that, so he can be far more ludicrous and creative with his
You can do
his
pretty
methods.
much anything, can't
And
you?
it's cool because it sort of inspires her to be creative with what she does. So even though her imagination and dreams are potentially how he's trying to kill her and everyone, it's by using her imagination and a bit and thinking outside the box is what allows her to get her own back on him. And how do you feel about the fact that so how do you beat him? Obviously the scene straight afterwards shows he's still very active, but assume that I think when he disintegrates, that's not happened yet, has it? That effect, you know what I mean? That when he disintegrates because she turns her back to him, and there's a lot of this talk of just turn your back, turn your back on the fear. That's obviously, I would say, that's how you beat him. Is it? What is that? Is that I'm not afraid anymore? What is it? Not is it when you're not afraid of him at all? Is when he can't.
Yeah. So that basically is. He feeds on power, so the more people who are scared of him, the more people talk about Freddy Krueger, and the more people who know about him, the stronger he kind of gets, and that's how he can... And as I say, Freddy versus Jason plays with that idea that the town doesn't remember him, so he's got no power, and slowly but surely he gets up to full power, it's almost like he's charging up, sort of thing. And... I mean, it's a bold move for her to do that, because if it doesn't work, he's got a free shot. So again, it shows a lot of courage for her character to do that as well. It's not just a thing of she hasn't killed him and defeated him. She's almost said, do what you will because you can't hurt me.
Have you seen Labyrinth?
I haven't.
You have no power over me. It's the for me. It was very the fact they look a bit alike. The leading roles. It's sort of. I was thinking, it feels like that.
Oh, Labyrinth. That's Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah,
isn't it? Yeah.
They
I realise that now. Yeah.
And I mean, he comes in through the window at the beginning of that movie. Not that he comes in through the window, but it's all very. It's not similar at all, really. But that bit lines up, I think. Yeah.
So critically and audience reception of this, kind of in line with what we've been saying, and kind of in line with my own personal views on the film.
6 out of 10, not enough sex. Critically.
Wow, that is your endorsement of this film. 6 out of 10, not enough sex. Right, okay then.
No, 10 out of 10. It's a great movie.
So this has a Metascore critic review of 76, a user score of 8.6, so slightly more favourable amongst the audience there, a tomato meter score of 95%, a popcorn meter score of 84%, IMDb 7.4 out of 10, which I think is relatively low.
Yeah,
I feel like that
low.
should be higher. And then a Letterboxd score of 3.7. Again, relatively low. I think it should be higher.
Why do you think that it's slightly falling under those? Do you think... I can't really see that, to be honest.
I think by the time these things would have come out...
It's already aged a bit,
It's already, what, 20 years old, probably, by that point? It's a bit like Halloween for me. I've seen a lot more done with the slasher genre by the time I'd seen Halloween. So for me, Halloween isn't a favourite of mine because I've seen it done better before I'd seen the original. Here, I don't think I've ever really seen anything quite like Nightmare on Elm Street. Whereas, I'm not saying everybody else has, but I think by the time these things come out and people have
hammed up the horrors. They've made more quippy jokes. There's done more dream sequences. Like, imagine watching this after Stranger Things.
Maybe slightly influenced by later less than iterations. It's a part and parcel with any kind of long-running franchise that has over 3 or 4 entries.
Loses the punch.
It does, yeah. But I think interestingly, A New Nightmare, which was Wes Craven, that was ahead of its time again. That was one where I think you'd like that. So basically, Freddy Krueger becomes... how do I describe it? Let's start again. So essentially, everybody who's in the original, or not everybody, but everybody who's been in Nightmare on Elm Street in that film plays themselves. And they're working on a new instalment of A Nightmare on Elm Street. And because they're talking about Freddy, a bit like what we were saying with the fear of Freddy actually becomes real.
I like that plot. That's a good plot.
So Wes Craven is in it and plays himself. He plays Wes Craven. And so... But
that is ahead. It's like super meta. It's like what all those stupid movies are doing now, but badly.
But that was released early 90s.
Yeah.
And I think at that point... little bit too ahead of the game. I think you could release that 5-10 years ago, and people Cabin in the Woods.
Like, this is the most coolest new horror movie ever made.
The Cabin in the Woods is very much a meta horror, and it plays with the genres and it plays with all of those things.
People loved that, didn't they? I didn't love that, and I love Buffy, and I know Joss Whedon. There's lots of stuff there, but I love Buffy, so. I love Buffy. Yeah. And to thank you, Joss Whedon, for that. And but I feel like I don't know why that one didn't really do it for me. Cabin in the Woods.
I think you're not a massive horror fan, are you?
No, but I just even where it went, when they went in the lift underground, and I
think it's better for people who are really into horror.
Yeah. So.
I'm really into horror, so it plays with the genre an awful lot. So the more horror you've seen, the better the film is, because you get the references and you get the kind of play on the genre.
You have to watch more movies to like it.
So I think A New Nightmare came a little bit ahead of its time. But certainly, fans of the franchise will say they have their preferences, but generally speaking, they will say they're a fan of the franchise. But for the mainstream audience, it's number one, and the rest is not so good. Yeah. So I think perhaps that's influenced there. And again, not that any of these ratings mean anything. If you like a film, you like a film. It doesn't really matter about ratings.
I will not watch anything under 7.8.
My wife Hannah does that, right? It's the most infuriating thing in the world. She will see a review. Oh, it's only got we'll be watching something, and I'll go, oh, do you want to put this on? And it's only got 1.5 stars. It looks rubbish.
I would.
And I'm like,
I have to say, I do that now. Though, really, I'm more like a YouTube reviewer. So I've more recently, because so many terrible films come out at the moment, and even in franchises that I absolutely love, like Star Wars. I never thought I would ever see the day where I wouldn't watch a couple of Star Wars movies, but I didn't, because I just trusted in sort of certain people on YouTube that I liked, and I'd get more enjoyment out of watching the review and them just saying it's shit. Do you know what I mean? Because I was like, oh, thank God I didn't have to sit through that. But I think so I do get that, to be honest, especially when there's so many movies now, and you can't. I think I don't want to spend my time. I guess the thing is, the worst thing you can do is just put on a film and then turn it off. If you don't like it, you could just...
That's the biggest kind of...
Could just take a dive.
That's the most damning verdict, isn't it? Is if you don't even finish the film.
But I wouldn't really be looking for... I guess the sort of... Nowadays, you don't have to look at arty-farty, Guardian critics to you don't have to look at their reviews anymore, because I know they don't tell me what I like, but I know you can find a certain subset of people on YouTube that like similar stuff to you, so you can generally know if they don't like this Star Wars movie, there ain't no way I'm gonna like this movie, because I think because there's so many sources of it these days. But I think but yeah, so I probably would, yeah, I get Hannah doing that.
it literally infuriates me, because I always make up my own opinion, because I've watched so many films that are either good or bad, but people have said it's either good or bad. So, yeah. What was the most recent one that people had said was amazing, and I thought was shit? And I was just like, what are people raving at? Barbie.
Oh yeah, I didn't.
So many people said that was so good, and it's not before anybody. And I realise this is a tangent.
I don't think you're going to have anyone jump on you on your podcast about not liking that Barbie movie.
The problem that you have is that sometimes in certain circles, if you criticise a film that has a good message or has a good, for example, that film done a lot for women's rights, and a lot of, it challenged, toxic masculinity and all of those things. So it kind of, in some circles, not all circles, but in some circles, if you say you dislike the film, it must mean that it's because you don't like the message.
Yeah, but that's cack, and the movie was cack.
I didn't like it because I didn't think the message was that good. No. In terms of the way it portrayed it, I think it could have done much better. I can't even really remember why, so my point is kind of invalid, because I can't really back it up.
I think, but I don't know if we're the right people to talk about the Barbie movie, but for me, it's it's the same people.
Yeah, we're both middle, kind of early 30s white males.
When people like the Marvel movies, and they say, "Oh," and I'm just like, "Yeah, but." Most of them are rubbish, and it's some people like them just because, it's to be fair, I used to love all these characters growing up, and then when they brought them all to life growing up, it's just really good to see them on screen, and it's that's not enough for me. I actually want them to be good, and I love Marvel too, and I grew up with lots of cool Marvel stuff and toys and reading comics and stuff, but I can't sit for a super long time in a movie that's just feels like there's really not. The stakes seem massive, but they don't feel massive to me. And I feel with the Barbie thing, if you grew up with Barbies and and obviously, I guess it's going to evoke a sense of, this is the Barbie movie and stuff. But to be honest, I sat right at the back of Bognor Picturedrome, and it was the movie was too quiet. We were right at the back. So it was, but I've since it's been because we had it on a bit when it was on telly, on the streaming thing, and we watched a bit of it. And I was like, this could have been done really well, and I don't think it was. And my least favourite thing about the Barbie movie is that the crazy Barbie wasn't crazy enough. You know, like when they go to like up the house on the top, you're like, oh, this is going to be like, you know, when there's going to be like a crazy Barbie, and it felt like a really like they all just standing there chatting. My pet hate with movies in general is just when there's a load of people standing there chatting, and the Barbie has that a lot, and the Barbie, but there's not much standing and chatting in You know, they probably stand and chat in their Nightmare on Elm Street when they're in the police station or something. But that's because they're in the police station.
But that brings us on quite nicely back to the film that we're actually talking about.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. I think it's that thing where the pacing of a film sometimes... I know what you mean with the standing around chatting kind of argument.
Do you know what I mean?
It's a bit like, okay, well, what are we doing?
I actually think that's a... has anyone recognised that before as the problem with bad movies? Because in every series I don't like, it's because there's too much standing around chatting, and like they haven't thought enough about what's going on in it.
I think it's because those standing around chatting scenes, they're only really there to forward to the next scene.
Yeah,
it's not like it's a really big character development moment. It's only ever, and it's usually in, like, I'm watching a lot of Criminal Minds at the moment, and it has that an awful lot because it's just a police procedural. So it's like, okay, we need to go over here, we need to get to this point, and we need to forward along the plot. How do we do that? All stand in a line or all stand around a table and say, okay, we need to do X, Y, and Z. You go over there, you go and do this. Okay, I'm going to go and do this. Boom, you're in the next scene. And that's kind of where the problems is, that it doesn't... It's that the scene is there purely to get to the next scene, and it's not an interesting way of doing that. Whereas I think with Nightmare on Elm Street, it doesn't have that because it always has an interesting way of getting the story along.
It feels very much like a set piece after set piece, doesn't it? It reminds me of like when you watch like a good like Spielberg like Indiana Jones movie. It's like big thing happens, big thing happens, big thing happens, big thing happens.
It's woven nicely together. It's not just a collection of big spectacle moments and not a lot in between. You have those kind of those intimate moments. Like I know you said about standing around chatting, and that's the perfect scene where they're on the bridge.
Yeah, but that's a great scene because you know what it made me think, and you know. Film school level 1, or I don't know. So if it's been recognised before, but you know, I was like, oh, does the bridge represent like the bridge over to the other side? You know, there's the bridge they're standing on because this is the part where there's a couple
of things it could, bridge over to Freddy's world, Freddy's domain,
and she's bridging.
To be honest, to me, it could quite easily symbolise the bridge between teenage and adulthood. You know, because it's Nancy going, I've got to take control of this. Here's the book. Here's this book. I'm going to try and use this to defeat Freddy. That's her becoming... This is going to sound really misogynistic, but that's her becoming a woman. But that's her, no longer being a teenager. That's her becoming an adult, that kind of thing. That's what I mean. Like, that has a character arc in there. It has a character device in there. It's not just throwaway.
And it feels like that moment is like a respite from the chaos because it's they're out of the house. They're not in the police station. They're not at school. She's not falling asleep. They're like they have a moment of like, how are we going to deal with this? And Freddy Krueger ain't there. Do you know what I mean? It's great.
I mean, this probably says a lot more about me, but in that scene, the only thing I could really focus on was how cavalier he put his burger and his drink on the edge of that, little barrier. And I'm like, if you knock that, that's going straight in the river. That's why Johnny Depp
went so far, I think, just because he's always risk taking. He's like they saw that.
Keeping it all back down to this scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said that was his first movie.
His first movie, yeah. I think he'd done some adverts and stuff like that before, but generally that was his first movie. And you hear a lot, like, for example, Jennifer Aniston's first movie was in the Leprechaun film, which is a B-movie horror film. It's not like that, and you hear a lot about. Paul Rudd was first in a Halloween film, I think Halloween 5, I want to say. You hear about, a lot of people get their starts in horror films. And the reason why is because usually horror films are made on a lower budget, so they they can't go for all the big stars, so they hire people who are young, who haven't necessarily got much experience. So that's why that happens. But it doesn't. By the time when I'm watching Glenn, I'm not watching a bad actor. I'm not, and to be fair, I'm not watching any of that really. Nancy at times can be a little bit GCSE or high school acting for people who don't know what GCSEs are. Fits to some extent. Glenn doesn't. He feels very much. He feels like a centred, real, fully developed character, and obviously a lot of that comes from the script, but a lot of that comes from an actor's ability to play the character. He could have been very much screaming and shouting and delivering lines in a certain way. Obviously, it comes down to the directing as well, but I think it's a really good kind of example of taking it back to Wes Craven. It's a good example of how he kind of knows what he needs in his films, or knows what he needed in this film. He needed somebody who's because Glenn is very much to Nancy. He's very much he's like a support device. Okay, he's a bit of a joker and he's not particularly reliable.
He's less reliable than the alarm clock, which she finds out.
Yeah, so he's not particularly reliable, but he's needed because without him, Nancy has to do it on her own. And okay, she ends up having to do it on her own, and it's because of the mistake that Glenn made of falling asleep. But it's that thing of having a... And I don't know how much of it is because we know what Johnny Depp went on to do, and how much of it is because he actually is good in it. I think it's probably somewhere in between. But, I think, long story short, what I'm trying to say here is you could see Johnny Depp was going to be, a big star.
Well, do you think he shines in this movie?
Wes Craven said that he was asking lots of interesting questions on set.
Yeah.
It wasn't just... What's my line and that sort of thing. He was asking, okay, so how do you want me to deliver this? What do you want me to do? What's Glenn's thinking here? Or asking, questions like that. So he was certainly,
Yeah, he was like working his way through scissor movies.
So,
before that, he was in. Do you reckon he was going like, oh yeah, you got any other mates making any scissor movies, any claw movies?
Yeah, we've got.
Yeah, I can hit you up, mate.
We've got Scissor 2, and we've got Back to the Scissor. So I feel like I could see the startings of what went on to become a really established, well-known actor.
Yeah.
So that's a good kind of start there.
I feel bad there's a recording of me slamming the Barbie movie, to be honest. I have to delete this.
We can all edit it out, son.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Leave it in. And there are loads of other movies I don't like, and I don't really vehemently dislike that movie for it or anything like that. And the fact that it got loads of buzz at the time is totally cool as well. I guess I just didn't enjoy it and jumped on the back of it.
I was expecting big things from it, and it didn't fulfil. Though it wasn't like I went into it not wanting to like it. I went into it really thinking, oh, this is great. Apparently, I'm really looking forward to this. Did
that get good reviews?
Yeah, generally speaking, it did. And I didn't agree with that. I watched it and thought I didn't think the humour was particularly funny. There were points, but generally speaking, I thought it felt a bit flat. I thought the actual general story of it was a bit pants and a bit far-fetched. Okay, yes.
I thought the general story of it was a bit pants.
Yeah. I know, I've got such a way with
delivery
words.
Was a bit pants as well.
Yeah. I mean, Empire magazine reviews eat your heart out.
Christina quite likes the song that Ken... I'm just Ken. Sometimes I'll be a 10. And yeah, I can get behind that a bit actually. Yeah. Yeah,
I just was a little bit disappointed by it.
I didn't go see Oppenheimer. I haven't seen that.
Well, that was my favourite film of 2023. It was always going to be that, to be fair, because it's a Nolan film. But we are digressing an awful.
Sorry, yeah.
I mean, I never thought when we said we're going to do Nightmare on Elm Street, but there will be a point where you're talking about the Barbie movie. I never thought I'd get that link.
Yeah,
but
I don't know how we got
that's
there.
what I love about doing these podcasts, is you never quite know where you're going to go.
If it's a dream or not.
But would you like to know some names who were in the running or in the conversation for some of the characters for this film?
Jim
Nightmare on Elm
Carrey.
Street. So yeah, Jim Carrey was going to play Tina and Nancy. No, it wasn't Jim Carrey.
Oh.
So apparently Heather Langenkamp managed to get the role out of about 200 people who went to audition for it.
Wow.
So that's a big number. Some of those names are recognisable. People like Jennifer Grey, people like Demi Moore.
Oh, she's good.
People like Courtney Cox.
Oh, she's good.
Tracy Gould, Claudia Wells. So those are some big names. Interestingly, Courtney Cox goes on to star in another Wes Craven film, Scream, which we have an episode on. That was our first episode, was Scream. Ooh. So go back and listen to that one in the archives. Would you like to know some people who could have played Glenn?
Go on.
And when you hear these names, you can kind of see that it was stiff competition. And the same thing for Nancy, actually. Out of those names, I would say Heather Langenkamp is one of the less recognisable names, other than for people who are familiar with the franchise. But for Glenn, we could have had John Cusack.
Okay, yeah.
We could have had Brad Pitt.
Oh.
So there'd have been a lot more eating scenes, because Brad Pitt is always eating in his films.
He would have been burger in hand,
eating
not
it whilst talking to Nancy.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland. He could have played Glenn, and at that time, so that's what four or so years before the Lost Boys. So
okay.
I could see. Actually, I can't really see that, because I always see Kiefer Sutherland as a bit of a menacing type figure.
It's quite nice to imagine Brad Pitt as this role. He sort of...
I could see Brad Pitt.
I still can't see it. I'm terrible at seeing that, to be honest. I could imagine Jim Carrey as the Claw. Freddy Krueger. I could imagine him as the villain. How old would he have been then?
He would have been early 20s.
I can't imagine him as that.
Yeah.
But I can, in a remake...
Wow,
that would be great.
There we go, you heard it here first. If we ever hear Jim Carrey is going to play Freddy Krueger...
We've already seen The Claw.
We have.
Yeah.
We have.
We know it's good.
Another name, Nicolas Cage.
Whoa.
So that would have been a very different performance.
Yeah.
In the role of Lieutenant Thompson, we have Roy Scheider, who is... the T-shirt I'm wearing should give you a clue. I'm wearing a Jaws T-shirt.
Oh.
He played... I can't think of... What's the name of his character in Jaws? The character in Jaws. And in the role of Rod Lane, we could have had Darren Dalton, or the, for me, more recognisable name of Ralph Macchio, who is the Karate Kid himself. So we could have had him in the role of Rod. So there was some...
Martin Brody.
Martin Brody, that's it. There you go. So some recognisable names in there, and perhaps if you wanted another recognisable name in the role of Glenn, Charlie Sheen.
Oh, really?
So again, at that sort of time,
I can see that one. That one
kind of fits.
Similar
it's hard for me to see Charlie Sheen now, like before all the problems.
Yeah.
It's very easy to see him. 2.5 Men.
He kind of looks similar though, and I just see him as, if I imagine Hot Shots Charlie Sheen, then I sort of see him in this.
Yeah.
Because he's a bit of a silly character.
Well, Hot Shots was 4 years later, so yeah, that kind of works timeline wise.
Yeah.
So yeah, we obviously I said the phrase, the house that Freddie built, the house that Freddie built, a couple of times, but just to give some more kind of context to that. So this movie almost folded before production even began. So Smart Egg Productions was supposed to put in $1 million into the movie, but it dropped out a couple of days before filming. And Robert Shea, the producer, had to put in a lot of his own money and try to raise money from other sources as well. And then 2 weeks into shooting, the production had absolutely nothing left. So the crew were asked to work 1 week without pay.
Whoa.
So obviously some ethical questions there. But it goes back to what I was kind of saying about passion. I'm not saying that people won't work for free, because people do. But it's a lot easier when people believe in a project. When it's a project where people have no faith in, have no, this is going to be terrible, this film, I don't think people are going to be wanting to work for nothing, other than perhaps to get a bit of experience, So there is that. So director Wes Craven missed the first table reading because his agent advised him not to come due to financial insecurity. Eventually, Robert Shea, the producer, brokered a deal with Media Home Entertainment and subsequently persuaded Smart Egg to put up the final $200,000 to complete the film. So a lot of production issues right from the off here, and a lot of funding issues right from the off. And it all goes into that thing of being a make or break film. So maybe the reason this film works on so many levels is because people needed it to work. It was a point where if this doesn't work, we're out of a job. If this doesn't work, this company is on its arse, it's folded. So, and that can often bring out really, positive things. Not saying it works.
Maybe that's why they auditioned like 200 leading roles.
They had to get it right, and they're like, well, who are we going to get? And actually, Heather Langenkamp is from those 200, as I said, is not the most recognisable in the least. And so that's a risk. That's a real risk, because you would kind of want, at that point, if you're wanting to make some money, okay, perhaps they couldn't afford anybody else, but if you could try and wangle a bit of a deal to get, say, just because she's a name, not saying she's right for the role, but somebody with Jamie Lee Curtis's name value, or somebody with, somebody else, or somebody else with a bit of name value, that's going to bring people in to see the film a bit more than, no disrespect to Heather Langenkamp, but at the time, she's not going to be a name people are going, let's go and see that film with her in it. I don't think nobody's really going to have been saying that. But it all kind of goes back to me for this initial idea from Wes Craven, which came from his... so I said earlier it came from a dream that he had, along with the bully at his school called Fred Krueger. But there was another little kind of thing that he picked up. So apparently he read in the Los Angeles Times a series of articles over a 3-year period about a group of Southeast Asian refugees from the Hmong tribe, several of whom died in the throes of horrific nightmares.
Whoa.
So, Freddy could be real. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. So obviously that's inspired him a little bit. Wes Craven wrote the script and presented it in 1981 and tried to get it to a major studio, but apparently nobody wanted it. So studios don't always necessarily know what they're looking at. Even friend and business partner, horror fans will recognise this name, Sean S. Cunningham, with whom he had made The Last House on the Left, wasn't totally convinced the premise would work. Now, Sean S. Cunningham went on to do Friday the 13th, so he's a recognisable name in horror genres. But Craven said that he just flew the idea around for 3 years until Rob Shea of New Line Cinema, who was a distributor, wanted to produce movies and picked it up.
It's crazy, isn't it, how someone has a vision, but it's so hard to relay it to someone who's not got that same vision. Like some people could hear it, but I don't think that would I don't think that would work in a movie. Like, how are you going to do those dream sequences? Like, you know, Freddy Krueger, he sounds a bit like a weirdo. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, like, have you thought more about the villain, what he looks like, and that, you know, surely he should be more serious. You don't want him joking. It's just weird. It's crazy. It seems so obvious, like, with hindsight, like, yeah, you know, this movie's gonna be, it's a great idea, but like it you know, for a big studio to take punts on something, I guess they're just thinking about all the reasons why it might not work or something.
Yeah,
so maybe that's the attitude to.
I think there's a lot of pitfalls in the narrative, isn't there, where you could go down some difficult routes to get back out of. It is a very so hang on a minute. So there's a killer on the loose, but he's not real. He's in people's what? So how does he kill people then? What's going? It's, you know, you have to kind of just accept it and then let it wash over you, rather than, you know, from a point of view. I may not be saying this if I was putting money into it. I may be saying, well, hang on a minute, can we just get rid of that dream stuff and, you know, but to have that kind of vision and to persevere, because he could have just gone, you know, nobody wants this film, I'm gonna, you know, chuck it in the bin, and then we'd never hear about this film, you know. So to actually persevere and kind of go, actually, there's something here, let's just keep it on the back burner until somebody wants to pick it up, you know. So we're very lucky for that.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what movies are in the bin, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, you know, the best example is, okay, it ended up getting made, but the Alien 3, one of the concepts for that is so much better than what actually we ended up getting. Now, I don't mind Alien 3, but it's an example of how many, you know, you've got, for example, Nicolas Cage's Superman, you know, that, what's his name, Kevin Smith was going to make. We've got Tim Burton, there's another one by Tim Burton that he was going to do. Yeah, sorry, Tim Burton's Superman that he was going to do. So there's so many different kind of, and that's all the things based on things that we know. So how many, as you say, original cool ideas for films just get, you know, lost into obscurity because nobody wants to take a punt on it. And I think that's an awful lot of movie making, is you have to have a bit of luck. You have to have somebody going, all right, I'll give you some money for that. Yeah, we make that.
You need a cigar smoking fat cat.
Yes, you do.
You do. You need someone to take a punt in a suit.
Absolutely. You need somebody to say, you know what?
I believe in this boy.
Yeah, you've got something, kid.
you need that guy.
We can see. You know, you need somebody like that.
I love this Freddy character.
This guy, he's so crazy. Listen to this idea he's got. You know, things like that. But without, you know, we're laughing and joking. But without that, so many decent movies don't get made. So there is an element of luck involved. So I said earlier that Robert Englund was originally not cast. It was a stuntman. Well, you can actually see that in the film.
Whoa.
They kept some of that footage there because we know Hollywood, they don't like to waste stuff. So, the very first time we see Freddy in this movie, he's not being played by Robert Englund.
When he rips his face off? Oh, or is it when he's doing all his knives? And
so this is when this is at the very, very start, that letterbox kind of, when he's making his glove and he's doing all of the he's moving it and making it. So it says here, so the special effects man Charles Belladinelli, let's say it like that, was the only one who knew exactly how to cut the glove and insert the blades. So when he's making it, that's not Freddy Krueger, that's not Robert Englund, that is Charles Bernadette. That's Charlie, that fella. He's the one doing that because he's the only one who knew how to do that. And I love those kind of little tidbits, those little factoids that you hear where you go, that's not actually that dude there, or that's not him, or, you know, that bit. Do you know how they've done that? I love finding that sort of stuff out. So it took Robert Englund about 3 hours to get into the makeup for Freddy, which by makeup standards is pretty good going. You know, we're just in the midst of the Penguin TV show coming out. Colin Farrell apparently takes about 8 hours to get into that.
That is grim.
Yep. Yeah, there you go. We mentioned earlier about that first scene where not first scene, but the scene where he's running down the alleyway and his arms elongate.
Oh yeah.
So it seems like it's done exactly how we would probably think it's done, which makes it even better for me. Like, I don't want to hear about, it's this big elaborate way of doing things. I think a lot of horror filmmaking particularly is about using what you've got to hand and just being a little bit simple with it. So they literally had men with fishing poles on each side of the alley operating a set of puppet arms that were attached to Robert Englund. So he's obviously just standing with his arms by his side or behind his back, and then attached to him are these two fishing poles which have got people on either side of the alley just moving up and down.
Amazing.
And, you know, some might say that scene, myself included, looks a bit janky, and it looks exactly how I've just described it, to be totally honest. But that's what makes me love it a little bit more.
Yeah, to me, all those things add to make it more surreal, and you know, like, because things like that,
it just looks a bit odd.
Is real. It's just, but it's fishing rods.
You know, it's just one of those things where you kind of think there's probably a better way to make that look better, but in doing so, for me, loses all of its charm. I like the fact that when she gets pulled through that little window at the end, I like the fact that you can see it's just a blow-up doll. You know, those little things, for me, give it that charm and give it that thing that, you know, I'm not going to say, the reason I come back and watch this film time and time again is for that end scene when she gets pulled through the thing. It's when he gets his arms elongated, you know, in the alley. But they're the things that kind of give me a little bit of warmth inside and a little bit of comfort, because it's a flawed, you know, it's not a perfect film, but I like that I can see.
But yeah, why would you want it to be? Like, why would you want that to be? Why would you want that? What is that going to give you extra that she's just pulled through the door and it looks more realistic? Like, you know, it. I feel like I don't know. You know, especially if you've had like a couple of beers or something, you're not going to care. I don't. Yeah, I don't know. You're right. It's those little imperfections that make it really sort of nice.
You mentioned something quite interesting there. You know, when you've had a couple of beers. Now, you know, for many a people, you know, horror movies have been kind of like ideal date movies, and you know, we spoke about this on the Scream episode with Wes Craven, how, you know, with Scream he rejuvenated the date movie or the horror date movie. You know, this is one of those films that I feel like a lot of, you know, young couples would have gone and seen. You know, certainly I enjoyed, you know, watching this, you know, with my wife for the first time, I think something like 6 or 7 months ago, where she'd never seen it. I couldn't believe she'd never seen it, because how can you not want to go and see this? But it's, you know, and it's those things that I think young couples and, you know, young people, I'm getting a little bit romantic and sentimental here, but young people looking just to have a nice time at a date will find those things a little bit funnier. If you go, like, nowadays, if you go and watch a horror movie, there aren't going to be those things, because it's all going to be CGI and it's all going to be, you know, essentially trying to look as realistic as possible, and to the point where it's too scary, it's too, you know, too grotesque looking. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for that, but with date movies, if it's not a comedy, you know,
it's not necessarily about hyper immersion. Like the idea of this movie doesn't feel like a movie that wants you to come out feeling weird.
No,
like, because it has a bit of a resolution at the end that gets ruined, but you're not ruined. But you know, he comes back. It's got the twist at the end, but or he comes out again at the end. But like, it doesn't want to make you. You know, I've watched lots of horror movies where you go out straight after watching it, or whatever, and then you just feel messed up. Do you know what I mean? You don't feel like
you start questioning stuff in real life,
and the rest of your night is weird. Whereas I feel like with this, like, maybe if you're really young, or maybe even back then, like, just being, it would sort of make you think about it when you're in bed. But I feel like it feels like it does want you to have fun, and I feel like the fact when she gets her own back on him is really brings that it's good. It has enough of a Yeah, I feel like I agree with you, Ryan.
I think first and foremost, it remembers it's a movie.
Yeah.
It remembers that most people, when they first watch this, when it first came out, are going to be at the back of a theatre with a bucket of popcorn, trying to, show your new prospective girlfriend, a good time, and hey, let's become boyfriend and girlfriend. And so,
right? No, you're right. Yeah, you're all right.
I've got all the chat up lines, me.
Show your prospective girlfriend.
No,
yeah, I know.
That's what. But do you know what I mean? Like, I think for most people, we can all remember a time where we've been on a date, and if it's been at a movie, we're not really watching the movie. We're just trying to have a good time with that person. And I'm not trying to say anything sordid before people start, thinking I'm a dirty old man or anything like that. You're just trying to just watch a movie and enjoy the company of the person that you're watching the film with. Okay, yes, you're not going to be talking and chatting, but you may be holding hands, you may be having your arm around each other, whatever it may be. But I think this is a great movie for that, because it has those moments where you might want to, get a bit scared and just cuddle up a little closer to the person next to you.
What?
But it also has those moments where it is a bit silly, it is a bit,
Well, I'm hoping that they're doing a showing of this at Bognor Pictodrome, in a few weeks. I was hoping to go see it.
Well, it's probably because of the 40th anniversary.
Oh, that is
so I would say, take your other half, go down to the Pictodrome in Bognor. But if it's being shown anywhere in your local area, wherever you may be, whether you're in the US, whether you're in Japan, wherever you may be, if it's on in your local theatre, go and watch it.
Because I wouldn't say that if it was Hills of Eyes. I wouldn't say it if it was one of the dark ones. It'd be like, oh yeah, you can go watch that if you want. But do you like horror films? With this one, I'd be like, even if you don't like, just go because it's a great movie.
Not that this is a sign of a good movie, but if you're saying to somebody who you're trying to woo, you're trying to court somebody, showing my age a little bit now. It's all done on Tinternet and all of that. Yeah. But if you're trying to woo somebody and trying to say, should we go on a date? If you say, do you want to go and see a film? They've got a Nightmare on Elm Street on. Yeah, people will be like, oh, that's a bit scary. But I think if you go say, do you want to go and see The Hills Have Eyes? Yeah. People may be thinking, what, that film where it's out in the middle of nowhere with a really deranged family.
Those horrors obviously have a place. Just the super terrifying ones that don't really, and they have a dark ending and stuff. But they also have a place, don't they? But they're not date movies. No, they're not. Actually, they're not, and they're not even fun, are they? Really? I mean, I guess it can be fun, but
you watch them for a different reason, don't you?
Yeah.
Like I've never watched this film, and it seems strange saying this for a horror film. I've never watched this film and been like, I'm so scared of this.
Yeah.
I've never watched that and thought that. Now, maybe it's because I watched it at an age where I wasn't really scared by horror films anymore. If I'd have been a bit younger, perhaps. But I've watched this and gone, it's just a great movie. It's fun. It's inventive in the way it kills off its cast. It's well made. It has good acting. For a horror film, what else could you really, really want? If you want to watch a film that's really going to properly scare you, this perhaps isn't the film for you. But if you want a good film that has good practical effects, has good acting, has good directing, has a good script, has a good villain, Nightmare on Elm Street is perfect for you.
I'm silent because that's the end.
I think we need to get on to further watches.
Oh,
now.
Sorry, it's not the end. I thought that was the wrap up, Ryan. Sorry.
I'll edit that, so I'll edit that all in.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So,
sorry.
In terms of further watching, then, I don't know if what films kind of sprung to your mind when you were watching this that it reminded you of.
Let me check my phone. But every time I read Marge Thompson, by the way, the mum's name, I always think of Marge Simpson. And I don't know if you got that earlier. I meant Groundskeeper Willie, not necessarily in general, but I meant just that Halloween episode.
Yeah,
where he
yeah,
is
I
Freddy
know the
Krueger.
episode. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, one of the more modern horror movies that is just more scare, but I did really like it when I saw it in the cinema, was It Follows. I actually really like that
Good
one.
shout.
I prefer this though now looking back, but that has like, well, I've said before on the other one, but when the tall dude comes through the window,
Yeah, it's a bit of a freaky moment.
but I wonder
isn't it?
whether now watching that a bit later, if that will look a bit dumb.
I don't think it.
Is
I don't,
it still
I don't
look
think
just
it
as
was.
terrifying?
I think it does. I think it. Obviously, it's doing something a bit different, isn't it? I don't think it looks dumb at all.
No, but does it look more? Is that just a tall guy coming through a window, or have
Yeah,
they
yeah.
done special effects? I
Yeah,
can't remember.
it's forced perspective. So
When they when that happened in the cinema, that freaked me out. Actually, that bit, like, that was probably one of those moments I can definitely say scared me.
I think I had the same feeling. So
but
I was like, I don't like this.
but you know, it has the same thing where at the end they sort of come together, and I think that's good. But I prefer this. But yeah, I would watch that if you're into that kind of thing. I mean, the fact that what is It Follows again? Is it like it's just, what is the villain in that?
Well,
is it like a thing?
It's like a metaphysical kind of thing that follows you. I mean, you know, after you've had, you know, it's passed on via sex, isn't it?
Yeah,
so
okay.
after you've had sex, this thing follows you until it kills you, and then works its way back down the cycle almost. And I think where the similarity is a little bit there is it has its kind of quite simplistic mythology. You know, that's a very cool premise. It doesn't really go into too much the backstory and here's why this happens and 17 years ago and all of this stuff. It doesn't really do that. It kind of just says, here's the premise, here's some scary shit, enjoy. You know, and I think it's similar here.
Quite well, right? I remember that one doing it for a modern one, and I mean, series, you know, Stranger Things is pretty much all this, isn't it? Like the upside down, whole upside down is pretty much, you know, it feels the same. The main girl, and it's called Nancy, I think. There's just so many harkbacks to this now. I realise, and it's good to see where a lot of it came from. And I actually really like Stranger Things. But I was one of those people that like watched a few series and then I dropped out for ages, and I came back and rewatched it, and I really I'm following it.
I think I've only seen the first season, and we keep saying, we need to watch that, and just never get around to it.
It does really ramp it up towards the more recent ones, and I'm really on board.
Okay.
I couldn't quite tell you now the plot, but
I'll
I
add
think
that
you
to the
should
list.
watch it, Ryan, because it does get good again if it ever went bad. There's a really cool character in it. I just thought, I don't know why, but the Ninth Gate, you know, like just because it's Johnny Depp doing some horror related stuff.
You got secret window there for Johnny Depp horror related stuff. You stole my story.
That's not the one I was thinking of, isn't it?
No, that's something different. Sorry.
No, that's
all
all right.
I've just decided to say another film.
yeah, all right.
What are your recommendations? Well, I think this.
And I had another one, but I've forgotten now. Labyrinth, I would say that just because
I think that's a good shout because we've mentioned it.
Yeah,
a couple
I think
of times,
now
haven't
we've mentioned it. Good to say. There was another one I hadn't written it down, and I've forgotten. But so sorry about that. Moving swiftly on to Ryan.
So I would say you've got, obviously, if you like the first one, go and watch the rest of the franchise, because there'll be, you know, I wouldn't say any film in the franchise is as good as the first one. But there are lots of neat, cool moments in that franchise to go and, you know, feast your eyes on. I think as well, if you just like horror franchises and you want, you know, a good chunk of films to work your way through, you've got the Friday the 13th franchise. That's fairly accessible. It's all on most of it is all on Paramount Plus. The Halloween franchise.
I should have said John Carpenter movies in general. If you like that sort of, I like the music in this, and it's very John Carpenter.
We haven't really spoken about the music that much, have we? But your music is a big part of it. Yeah, John Carpenter films. There's a film called Shocker, which is another Wes Craven film. it's not as good, but it's another example of Wes Craven and his kind of warped kind of ability to do weird things with horror. Obviously, the Scream film. There's even points where they reference Freddy Krueger in Scream. There's a scene in there where there's a guy who's a janitor called Fred wearing a red jumper and a fedora who is actually played by Wes Craven.
Oh, amazing.
So, and it's very reminiscent of that scene where you haven't got your hall pass in this film.
That's a great bit.
Yeah, that's kind of directly referenced in Scream. So lots of films there to kind of...
Liar, liar.
Yeah, because that's where the claw comes from, even though we've debunked that. But Liar, Liar, I mean, that's just a great film anyway, so just go watch that.
Yeah.
It doesn't really have much of a link to
Well,
Nightmare
you
on
can
Elm
see...
Street.
Well, I think that he'd be a great... if they ever do a remake, he'd be a great villain in this.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it to some extent.
You've got to see that.
I mean,
Jim
he may
Carrey
go a bit overboard, because that's kind of what Jim Carrey does, but...
Yeah. I'm sure
I'd
he could
put it
rein
this
in a
way,
bit.
if a new film came out called A Nightmare on Elm Street with Jim Carrey, I'm not going to say it would be good, but I would pay money to go and see it.
Yeah. Same.
So there's that. So...
Red Dragon Coffee Roasters. Our roasted coffee beans are so good, you'll think you've been strapped to a wheelchair, set alight, and pushed down Main Street. Red Dragon Coffee Roasters. Coffee with a bite.
Unfortunately, it's come to that time in the episode where we have to say goodbye. We hope you've enjoyed the episode as much as we've enjoyed putting it together for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe from wherever you get your podcasts from, and also head over to our social media platforms to stay up to date. We thank you for listening to Jimmy Murphy, Simon Keet and Ryan Etherington. Together, we are Bury Our Bones with Cinema. And it will be a one-button job. Boom, 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 toom, toom, toom.
I have a terrible tendency to just scroll about and like, you're talking when we're doing it. I still find it slightly distracting.
It's a bit weird, but I think it's a bit weird, but I suppose...
Maybe if we listen to it back, see if it sounds... I was like, I'm going to have to stop it. You're listening back like...
Good job I observed that well, wasn't it?